process, the amount of support that you have here, which continues to show that our core values really mean a lot in the district, and that you really have the support that you need, and continue to reach out to that admin team anytime you need to. They're great. They're great people to work with. Thank you all for coming this evening too. It's always nice to put a face with the name, and hopefully more often we can circulate around too as well once in a while, and get to see you all in action. Thank you again for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Nate, any other correspondence that dropped in?
No correspondence this month. I know I will have some next month, however.
Okay. All right. All right, we're going to jump forward a couple pages here then. Why don't we call up our student representatives then and have them give us an update on what's happening in the district. Oh, did I miss that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. One moment. I did skip over that. I am so sorry. Thank you for correcting me. Is there a motion to support the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right, a first by Ryan, a second by Marion. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yep. Any noes? Motion passes 7-0. I was so excited to keep all the highlights here, so I apologize. Thank you. All right, let's hear from the student representatives.
Hi. I have updates on events that happened back in December. For the STAR test, 62% of middle schoolers and 70% of high school students met their growth goal for the math section, and 52% of middle school students and 55% of high school students met their growth goal for the reading section. The band and choir concerts and the jazz tour all went really well. The live stream worked better for the band concert, so that was good. In upcoming events, the junior-senior lock-in is happening this Friday starting at 9:30 p.m. and goes till 2 a.m. About 50 students signed up for that, and there will be food and games all night. The end of first semester is also this Friday, and report cards don't go out until February 1st. Next Monday, students will have school off, and Student Council will be holding their annual Martin Luther King Jr. Soup Supper. You can either dine in or carry out your meal, and the cost is only $8, and you get a ceramic bowl if you dine in. So you can either pre-order by the website or calling the high school. And high school forensics team is also starting to practice, and their first meet is on February 7th, and as of now, it will be held in person.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'll start off with sports. So wrestling, they have their next meet Thursday night at Marshall. Boys basketball, their record so far is 6-3, and their next game is Thursday versus Marshall. I believe sports marketing is also hosting USA night for that game as well. And then for girls basketball, their record is 10-1 with their next game this Friday before the junior-senior lock-in. And last week, Ava Foley was nominated for Player of the Week. She unfortunately did not win, but she did come in second. For clubs, as they said earlier, the musical tryouts are tomorrow. And then on Saturday, there's a DECA meet and then also a virtual science Olympiad meet hosted by Westlake. For the rebranding, Ms. Schmitz talked with the team that she's working with, and they're starting the stage 1 of all the processes. And they sent over the drafts, but they ended up being pretty over budget. So Ms. Schmitz revised them to fit more of our students' wants and our school's budget. And now we're just waiting on the revised draft. Also, speaking of publications, we have our next issue of the Prowl coming out either the first or second week of February. And then during that first week of February, we also have Winter Week. We'll have lunch games and dress-up days. And then the juniors have their second practice online ACT test available for sign-up now for the 29th.
Thank you. Thank you to the both of you. All right. District administrator updates.
I actually have three different donations to start off with tonight. The first one is $1,500 from Colony Brands. Colony Brands has been fantastic to us in the last 3 years. Throughout COVID as well, they've done scholarships for our graduating seniors. In fact, at one point, every single graduate. This time, a $1,500 donation to the Backpack Club. We also have two other donations. One is a $200 donation from Tim and Julie Blair, also to the Backpack Club. And then finally, a $250 donation toward the Wildcat Closet from the Primrose Lutheran Church. So now that we have our homeless liaison in Jenny DeLorme, this has been a big bonus to have somebody that is not only taking these in, but then able to work on projects. I think when some of the board members were able to tour the buildings, we did have a chance to go down and see the Wildcat Closet and how much work has been done in organizing that. So if some of our students who struggle, their families struggle financially, there is a place that they can go, whether it's for supplies, clothing, boots, outdoor wear, those kinds of things. And that's really coming along really quickly under Jenny's leadership and donations like this. I did want to talk a little bit about the CDC's test to stay policy. We heard about this in December as a school district, and then they said they would have more updates early in 2022, which is here now, and we would hear more from DHS. What it would do, it would allow students that are close contacts but either unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated to continue to test to stay in school rather than having to quarantine. The issue that we're having right now is a lack of tests. So we can get PCR tests, but again, that is something that if we do them here, we have to send out to a courier and then wait several days, just like you typically would, but even probably a longer period of time, what we found with districts that are doing that, instead of just going to the Alliant Energy Center. Our rapid test had been very successful. We had actually gone through about, I think, 250, something like that, tests already this year. Right now, though, we have run through all of those tests. DHS is not providing any additional tests at this time because of what's a worldwide shortage of the rapid antigen tests. And so right now we've got to send also those students to the Alliant Energy Center or local testing centers. So unfortunately, we hope this would come back so we'd have the opportunity to do some of this rapid testing. At this point now, you also probably heard in the news that originally there was a cap on the pricing, whether you bought it at Walgreens or CVS. Cap came off. If you walked around the drugstores, those prices almost doubled after that cap came off. And so there is a real need for those right now, and we're not the only school district struggling to get them. We use Accelerated Labs, which is a third party that DHS had aligned us with, to get those tests and then submit our results to. But right now, again, we're one of many school districts that no longer have enough tests to test everybody that we would like to. I also want to give an update on air quality testing. As we had made note of in an earlier board meeting, there is a class action lawsuit against GPS, which is Global Plasma Solutions, the air ionization system that was installed in our buildings almost exactly a year ago. One of the concerns is that it wasn't doing its job, and so what we did do is have a independent company come in and do some air quality testing. What we found was the levels that we were looking for in specific kinds of tests, specifically formaldehyde, were actually well below the standards, even the very strict California standards in parts per billion. So that's very good news. We're still waiting on any updates that we might have on a legal sense of things. Had actually reached out to the Department of Health Services and their indoor air quality to see if they have any other recommendations for us. In speaking with Alpha, the company that installed the system last Friday, they said that they have put in hundreds of these systems, so we're one of many school districts that are waiting to see what we do. But in terms of our own air quality, it came out very favorable and positive, so we're happy about that. And then finally, we won't reveal any names, but we're moving along with our Wildcat Wall of Fame nominations. We are now up to, I believe, 101 total nominations since we started this just about 4 years ago. So that's a great number. This particular year, just 2021, we had 18 new nominations, and the committee sent 6 names to the Young Samaritans to do the research and interviews with. We'll get back together in a few months, look at those interviews that they did. Usually the Young Samaritans like to offer up some advice on what the committee should do. The committee has their own vote, but the 3 students that are part of that committee also have a vote on that. So we get a panel of 12 that will vote on finalists. I would believe that we'll probably have 2 to 3 finalists for induction into 2022 Wildcat Wall of Fame for the board in just a few months. So that's it for me, unless anybody's got any questions.
Nate, can you speak to when you said the test and we would send them to Alliant? So what are the acceptable? What do you think the acceptable proof is if somebody else had a rapid test? Can you speak to that? Like, is it
Sure.
you could get tested?
Yeah. For us, when we've had our own rapid test, that's either myself or the district nurse, Anna Hellwig, administering that, because there's a specific way and method that they want you to do that, and a specific protocol when we're doing that. What we have not accepted is at-home tests, just because we don't know who's doing it and when that's happening. Any test that we would get from Alliant Energy Center or an email, some kind of confirmation that the parents provide online, we would also accept too.
So, I mean, I just happened to read today in the news, Middleton Outreach Ministry is doing them. Would that be something if somebody else administers, or, I mean, are there optional, if there's such a shortage?
Yeah, that might be something, yeah, I guess I would need to know a little bit more about how those reports, how they're reported. If they're just a community testing site and the results are still getting reported through the county, certainly yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are some possible options.
You-
despite
you bet.
The shortage. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, we really thought there was no issue up until into December. And then, of course, that's when we started hearing about the shortages. We tried to get more, ran through our own test just late last week. So it's coming at not such a great time either, but at least there's some community resources that can still get tested.
And I believe, I could be wrong, but I think, I was reading at some point too, that I think come Saturday, insurances have to start paying for those rapid tests as
Yeah, I
well
read
too.
that as
So
well.
hopefully it'll kind of open that up a little bit. And Governor Evers' office, along with DHS and DPI, are issuing letters to the districts here over the next couple of weeks as well too, to help give some more guidance and additional funding to prepare those. So hopefully that'll kind of open up some more availability to, I stuttered there a little bit, to get the districts online and going with this policy to keep the students in the classrooms. Yeah. Any other questions for Nate? Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks.
And just for the board and the audience, I want to make very clear here that this was an independent air quality study that was done by a third party, that what they found in our building is even, to Nate's point, I want to be very clear, was below even the strictest California standards. So what is there is more so, I would say, probably naturally occurring.
And they did talk a little bit about that. Haven't received the official report, but they did talk about whether it's perfumes, deodorants, some of those things where you have students and teachers in the classroom. They did want to test classrooms where we did have people present. So at the middle and high school, we tested 2 classrooms in the high school, 1 in the middle school. The middle school room had people currently in it. One of the high school classrooms had a class just leave it. Then we went over to the other building at the elementary school and had one of the older rooms in the building with students occupying it, and then one of the new parts of the building, just because you've got some system where it's run by the big air handlers, and then some which are the individual units, kind of the room blowers. So.
Do we have any idea what the numbers were before the unit was in?
No. But we didn't specifically do that test. But we did do a control. There's not a great location for the control because the air handlers don't run in those situations. So we either had the mezzanine where we store our chemical storage for cleaning products, or we had our middle school basement where you have other products like paint cans and things like that. Those were higher than what we found obviously in our classroom, which is also good news.
Yeah.
All right, no further discussion there, then we'll move on to Director of Student Services update.
Becca, you're on. I think they should be able to hear you.
Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, and I know you all had a chance to look at my report ahead of time, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. One, I included our compliance review from Mckinney Vento. So every year, the DPI randomly selects 25 school districts to check your Mckinney Vento, which is the homeless rules and regulations. That's, excuse me, done underneath Essar. There were 8 standards that we had to show compliance with. So I had to go and find documentation from our policy to procedures to things we present in the community and within the district. And then I had to have a phone call with the Department of Public Instruction, and we reviewed all of our documentation. We have 2 places that we need to just work a little harder on. One of them is public notices. So we don't have any like posters or information out in community sites regarding McKinney Vento. So Clara from the DPI talked to me about we can get posters actually free from a national site. And then what places would we want to put those so that community members and parents of our district would be able to find those and get information. So we'll be doing that. And then the other one was when we go through McKinney Vento rules and regulations with families, when we suspect them to be homeless, we often do it in a phone call or a face-to-face meeting. So we talk about what they have, what their rights are. We don't provide them with a pamphlet. And Clara said that's awesome that we have the ability to do that, but we do need to present it in writing as well. And that same national website offers those pamphlets. And she said those are perfect resources. So those are the 2 things that we will need to implement before the end of the month. And so Jenny and I will work on those to get those done. Otherwise, she was very impressed with the things that we're doing towards McKinney Vento. And she was super excited to hear all the awesome things Jenny is doing to really bring our families services that help them. So any questions about the McKinney Vento compliance?
I don't have questions, but that's incredible because that's a lot of hoops to jump through. So if that's all you got called on, that sounds great, Becca.
Yeah, and when I first got the rubric, I was a little like, oh my goodness. But as I started to pull all the information, we really do a lot of it. We just didn't know we weren't formalized with it, so that was good. So
That's great.
the other thing that was in my report was we're continuing to work through the procedural compliance self-assessment in special ed. It is an all-year process, something we do every 7 years. And part of that was a parent survey that actually went out last spring. And how it works is the DPI randomly selects a group of our parents, and we send out a letter and a code so they can either take the survey on paper and mail it into the DPI, or they can take it online. The DPI only asks for 10 responses, and then you're compliant. We only had 14 parents take it. So we were compliant, right? We had enough to take it, but we only had 14 of our, I think we had 60 parents selected that took it. So it's not really a fair representation, but the information we got from it was one of the big things that I walked away with was that of those parents that took it, a lot of them didn't feel like their child's IEP was being implemented correctly. Now granted, again, it's only 14 of our 101 families, but it still means that we have work to do there so that parents trust us. And so one of the things I would like to do is, we, right now, the administrative team fills out an LEA report after they've been the administrative representation in IEP, but I'd like to start having parents fill that out when they get done having an IEP meeting to give us information about how they felt the IEP went and information that we can take back as case managers. And then we do have the option to repeat that survey internally without like we can use the survey to resurvey our families again. And we could do that like at parent-teacher conferences, or we could do it all year after an IEP meeting, hand it to the parent, have them fill it out right away so that we get a better response rate. So just some things we can think about so we can continue to grow in that area. Any questions about the survey? No? Okay, and then the last part I just included were the grants that we have going right now in student services. We have quite a bit. I just finished filling out a grant, submitted it. It's actually through Dane County, trying to get a homework club started at the elementary school with high school mentors. So I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that we can get that grant started. And then Chrissy Killerland and I are going to work on an advanced learner grant this spring as well to bring some more funding in for our advanced learning program. So, any other questions?
I don't think so. Becca, thanks a lot for all that work. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. I don't mind, and I appreciate your flexibility with allowing me to do all that virtually.
No problem.
Not a problem.
And we could
Thank-
communicate this time. That is awesome.
Yeah, they're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Becca. Much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on then. CISA 2 report update.
CISA 2 Board of Control met on December 14th. We met at Buck and Honey's. It was our holiday meeting. And so we had a brief business meeting. We covered we had the first reading of the Head Start program masking and vaccination policy. That was probably the most discussed item. And then we had a few resignations, mainly from Head Start. So we actually will have our meeting tomorrow night because of the WASB convention the following week. So we'll be discussing the resolutions that will be voted on in the delegate session. And I'll be serving as the CISA 2 delegate. Is there any questions?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marion, for the
Thank you,
update.
Marion.
All right, then, we'll move on to discussion items for this evening. First up is a presentation from the National FFA Convention.
Oh, it worked. Hey, you can turn it yourself.
Oh.
Okay, all right. There we go. All right. I am Melissa Knutson. I'm the AIC teacher and FFA advisor here. And I was here back in September, August, whatever that was, to ask your approval to go on this trip. So tonight, Michael Wells is here to go through with his top takeaways of this trip. Michael is a new student this year, a senior from Oregon. So we're convincing him that he made the right move here. He has never been an FFA member before. So he has 1 year to cram in any and all that he can do. And so he was willing enough to make part of that experience standing up in front of you guys. So I will let him walk you through it. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna go over the whole trip basically. So first, we went on a coach bus. We had 47 total kids. We had 15 students from Belleville, grades ranging from 10 through 12th grade. This is our schedule, which I'd be more than happy to talk more about at the end if anybody wants to hear more about the schedule. And then these are my top takeaways, which I will be discussing throughout the presentation. So this is us at a high-end beef farm that showed ranching and insemination careers, which this is just a little part of agricultural careers that we explored. And this is a photo of us in the big shop area where they're talking more about what the farm does, such as like selling the cattle and stuff like that. And this is just more photos at the farm. But I wanted to talk on a career that interested me that we had at the convention. But there was a Miller welding booth, and that has to do a lot with agriculture because there are field welders which go out and they weld on the tractors and the sprayers and all that, which is something that interests me highly as I going into the Army as a welder. So that booth was just very interesting to me, and it's a pretty cool booth. They had a computer simulator, and all that was you put on goggles and you get like a little joystick kind of deal, and you 3D weld basically. It's really cool. So this was us at the rodeo in Indiana. And experience with new people is just simple things. Like when we would go wait in lines for food, we would talk with other FFA members from around the country, and we would get to know their backgrounds and why they joined FFA, and just simple things like that really made us know more people, and it was actually a really cool experience just doing that. And then we also learned about each rider, all the bull riders, all the horse riders, everything, and their backgrounds. And that was really cool too. And this is us doing time management. We had to follow a certain schedule, and we had to listen to directions and times to be on the bus and where to be at certain times, which, when you're out having a little bit of fun or trying to go and do something like get food, and then all of a sudden it's 1 o'clock and you have to be at convention at 1:15, you kind of have to run around a little bit. During some free time, we would plan out what to do so our time is used well. For example, we went to the Civil War Memorial, which we all thought was really cool, and we decided to get a picture in front of it. And it was a really cool experience just being there and kind of reading what was on there, and yeah, it was fun. And this is us being independent. So this is Lucas Oil Stadium where convention was actually, not convention actually was held, where the sessions were held. And then this is actually convention. We're walking around going to all these different booths and discussing careers and stuff like that with all these people at the booths. Most of the time we spent was in small groups. We used maps, and we would remember landmarks, directions, and we would communicate with peers to meet and where to meet so we could go and do things. Being responsible. This is us at a concert, the Brett Young concert we went to. And this is one of the sessions inside of Lucas Oil Stadium. We would wear official dress for this, and we would be following all rules. And because we knew we were representing Belleville, we wanted to make sure we were staying on top of those rules and making sure we were really setting a role model and, showing that we could do it. And being on time for everything, especially the bus, because if you if one person was late for the bus, you were making 47 other people late for the bus. It wasn't just you you were affecting, it was everybody. So you wanted to be on time everywhere, otherwise you couldn't move on without that one person being there. So being responsible had a lot to do with time management. And this is just some fun photos. This is Miss K at the mall on a little toy train. This is us walking through the drive-through at Arby's when we needed to get some food. This was some free Culvers that we had at convention. And this was a bus photo that we had. Thank you for all your guys' support. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
So my question to you would be, what made you decide to join FFA if this is your first year in it, being a senior?
So it was always like, it was something that I wanted to do in Oregon. It's just I never really got an opportunity to do it in Oregon. And coming here, I had the opportunity to, so I wanted to jump on that opportunity and do it because it's my last year in high school and I want to make the most of it the best that I can.
I want to thank you for addressing the career opportunities that you talked about. There's nothing like wearing the blue corduroy jacket. I grew up in Oregon, and it was an incredible experience. So congratulations on making that decision your senior year.
Thank you.
And joining the Army?
Mhm.
Yes? I have a feeling from your presentation here, you kind of have the character, you'll succeed.
Thank you.
Congratulations, that's an impressive selection. I
Thank
wish
you.
you well.
Yeah, you did a
Nice
great
job.
job on your presentation.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I have one
We're
more.
glad you're here. Way to go,
Thank you.
senior year, good job.
I have one more question for you.
Mhm.
Based on Mrs. Vinnie's talking about careers, what's the most surprising career you saw associated with FFA in agriculture?
It depends. If we're talking about when we were at the farm, the insemination career, kind of interesting, a little different.
Hey,
You know,
walked it
they
down.
handed us vials of bull semen, and they let us keep it for some odd reason. So that was just weird and different that they did that. At convention, Ford was there, and I don't know, it didn't really have much to do with agriculture, so it was one of those weirder jobs that they were kind of talking about. They were talking about sales people to join, so it didn't really have much to do with agriculture, so it was just one of those different ones. One of the ones that nobody really ever went to.
I suppose they probably want folks to sell their pickup trucks to the farmers and
Yeah, I
ag-
mean, that'd
ag
be one
career
thing that
folks.
I would assume, but
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So it looks like you guys had a good, fun trip, learned a lot along the way. You were all safe and
Mhm.
really held to the core values of the district. So thank you guys for doing that. That means a lot to the district as well and to everybody that you represent. Thank you for coming this evening.
you're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Trevor, is there flexibility in the schedule? Nick Johnson from Roffers Consulting is here. We've got the PowerPoints ready to go if we can.
I think we're fine with that. Melissa, is there anything else you wanted to add? Yeah, from your perspective, anything different this year with just everything we're dealing with in this world?
It was really different this year. Like numbers were still like there were a lot of people there, but there weren't as like so far out as normally. Like
Okay.
I don't know if I saw anybody from like normally you see more people from like California, like further far away from Indianapolis, and this year I didn't really. It was more local.
Okay.
And I think a lot of chapters stayed not as long or traveled separately because we were trying to fill our bus and trying to problem solve. Chapters couldn't because the Blairs and Verona ended up that they were told they couldn't go. So trying to problem solve that, and chapters being told if you go, you have to stay with just your group. You can't ride with other groups, but our bus is very good about, okay, like, our rules are the bus rules. If you're Green County, you're Dane County, or whatever, like, okay, we're going with the strictest whatever. And then hotel rooms were by chapter, we didn't mix any, like, chapters there.
Okay.
And so that was useful, but, it was fine, it was just, you could just tell it was different.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm sure
They
probably
played
not
it
as
great.
laid back as like you're probably used to in years past. And
I was excited. I was able to take 15 because Mr. Verona couldn't go.
Yeah.
We were trying to fill all the bus seats, so I was able to take 15
Yeah.
awesome kids.
that's great. That's great. Well, I'm glad that you guys had a good, safe trip too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's no objections from the board, we'll shift gears here for a moment. All right.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of an introduction here. Nick Johnson is here from MD Roffers Consulting. And as we have seen in the last few years in Belleville, many houses go up, basements be poured, plotting for additional houses within the district boundaries. We had gone back to a UW-Madison Applied Population Lab or study and looked at how close those predictions were, and that just is going back to 2015. And what district office staff found was that although we have about 933 students this year, the projections from the UW study, only going back about 7 years now, varied from about 828 to slightly over 1,000. I think I have in my notes about 1,007. Now, you would say that, well, that would be fairly accurate. When we look at a budgetary and then space viewpoint, in terms of a budget, if you're looking at each student bringing in about $10,000, let's say in state aid, to be 100 students low or 100 students high is a huge impact on what we would project out for our budget and our planning. And so with some of this growth that you're now starting to see, what Mark Roffers, Nick's boss, does is work locally. And his process is a little bit different. I'm sure Nick will explain it tonight, where they're doing a little bit more local research into the building that's taking place, how many, obviously, children are going to be in those new homes. And he'll have a proposal for you tonight that the board can bring back at another meeting. But it's an opportunity to hear from an enrollment approach so that we are not being reactionary, so we know what is going to come, and we can make decisions based on real solid data. As you can see, the data that we have that's now 7 years old is off by quite a bit one way or another. So the closest that the UW-Madison Applied Population Study was, they've got several different models, but their kindergarten model was the closest. That was 921 students they would have predicted for us this year, which gets us in the range of about 15 or so. So I'll turn it over to Nick. He can go through the presentation with you, and then we should have time for questions as well. And I want to just say thank you for your flexibility. Not knowing where this would actually fall, I'm glad that Nick's here because it always works a little bit better in person, and he was willing to come and spend some time in Belleville today.
Great.
Thank you.
Everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Nate. Like Nate said, my name's Nick Johnson. I'm an assistant planner with MD Roffers Consulting. Mark Roffers, the lead planner, the owner of MD Roffers Consulting, was unable to make it tonight due to a conflicting meeting that he wasn't able to move. So I'm here to chat with you all tonight about the proposed community growth and projection services for the school district of Belleville. So who we are, so we're urban planners by education and by training and background. That includes about half of our work is actually urban planning work, so working with municipalities on zoning, on land use plans, comprehensive plans, things like that. The other half of what we do is working with school districts. And we've been working with school districts in southern Wisconsin since the mid-1990s. I haven't been working since the mid-1990s. I would have been 5 then. But Mark has been. But overall, we've worked with about 36 or so school districts in the state. Most of the suburban Dane County school districts we've worked for. We've also worked for a lot of suburban Milwaukee school districts and then also several in the Fox Valley. We worked most recently with the Oregon School District. We wrapped up, I think, our third set of projections for them in June of last year, of 2021. But we've also worked with Verona, Middleton Cross Plains, DeForest, Waunakee, and Sun Prairie, among many others. So I'm here to present our innovative and tested approach for projections enrollment based on two kind of main factors that we work on for our projections. So the first being new housing growth. So there's a lot of new houses going up in Belleville. I actually drove before here in kind of the western new neighborhoods of the village of Belleville, and I think I counted over 24 new homes being built and then stopped counting because there were still more. So focusing on projecting housing growth. And then our second is demographic change. So looking at how births are changing in a community, if people are moving into the community, and if so, are they younger people that might have kids, or are they older people, retirees that wouldn't have kids, and other aspects of demographic change that I'll talk about too. So questions that our work can answer: how many students will be in the school district of Belleville in 2023, 25, 2030, and 2035? Furthermore, how many students within each grade group will be during those above years? So 4K to 6, your elementary grade group, 7 to 8, your middle grade group, and 9 to 12, your high school grade group. We'll also be able to map which parts of the district are experiencing increasing enrollment and which are experiencing decreasing enrollment, and by how much. We'll also compare projected enrollment to the building capacity of each school. So we'll be able to tell you not only if certain schools will exceed capacity, but when we are projecting that they would exceed capacity. And then what all of this might mean for future facility planning. Does the facilities here at the School District of Belleville have enough capacity for growth over the next 10 to 15 years? Or might there need to be a new school built, either an elementary or an intermediate school? Grade group shifts can also help too to increase capacity in certain schools. So that's something that we can help answer with this project. So the next several slides, I'll go over kind of the step-by-step process as to how we perform our housing and enrollment projections. All of the examples you'll see are from the Oregon School District, the work that we just did last June. So here's a map of the Oregon School District. Similar to the Oregon School District, for the School District of Belleville, we'll divide the school district into about 50 to 60 neighborhoods. These neighborhoods really become the basis for our data collection, our analysis, and our housing and our enrollment projections. We don't just draw them randomly. There's a rhyme and reason to these neighborhoods. They're drawn around entire residential subdivisions, so we can kind of keep those students in one neighborhood, and it just makes it easier to project them moving forward. We also do not cross municipal boundary lines. When we create our neighborhood boundaries, it's just that we're also able to provide projections for each municipality. So for the village of Belleville, and then for any other towns or other villages nearby. If there are specific growth areas in the village and throughout the rest of the school district, we'll kind of carve those off as well into their own neighborhoods, which also just makes it easier for us to project. And then we also use major roads, rail corridors, and rivers as boundaries for these neighborhoods. Our next main step then is projecting housing unit growth. So we project housing units in each neighborhood in 2023, 25, 2030, and 2035 through several different factors. So first we analyze municipal plans. So this would be like the future land use map or the comprehensive plan for the village of Belleville. We look at specific subdivision plats. So if we know there's 100 platted homes in this Bell West subdivision, we could, based on development pace, say that there will likely be 100 single-family homes in that neighborhood in 10 years or 15 years. We interview municipal staff, so we'll meet with the village planner for the village of Belleville, We'll also meet with local developers to ask them if they are interested in developing any specific land, if they own any specific land, or which parcels they really want to get their hands on, if they do want to build a subdivision somewhere specifically. And we'll also chat with local realtors just to get a feel for understanding the local housing market. So who's moving here, who's buying homes here, is the Village of Belleville attracting families or families that wouldn't maybe have children. And then we look at we project the rate of housing as well as the mix of housing. And we do that for each neighborhood. And the mix of housing is pretty interesting, as 100 apartment units really generate fewer students than 100 new single-family homes. We typically see maybe 3 to 5 students come from 100 apartment units, whereas we might see 50 to 60 students come from 100 single-family homes. So that's something that we'll project as well in our projections. It's kind of hard to read this, but this is a screenshot of our projection spreadsheet for the Oregon School District. We list specific subdivisions, new subdivisions that are coming online, the pace of development we expect in each neighborhood, when we expect that neighborhood to build out, the percentage of new homes in that neighborhood over the next 15 years that will be single-family homes, things like that. And this is actually included as an appendix in our report, so the school district would have access to all of this data and information. That second component of our projections is exploring demographic change. So we look at uncovering the birth rate, if it's been fairly steady over the last 10 years, if it's been declining, if it's been increasing, that all affects future enrollment for the schools. We'll look at migration patterns, other demographic trends. We'll look at neighborhood turnover, and we do this by looking at recent home sales as well as the ages of existing subdivisions. So every 20 to 30 years, we have seen in our school district work, neighborhoods kind of turn over and they cycle through families. So a new subdivision will have a lot of younger families, typically with a lot of younger kids. They'll be there for 10, 15 years, and then the kids grow up and then they're not in the school system anymore. By about 20 to 30 years is when we see those empty nesters then move out, and they're then replaced typically by another younger family with kids. So that's very important, as that's existing housing that can still generate quite a few new students for the district. Then our last major step is projecting enrollment. So we'll project enrollment for each grade group, so the elementary, middle, and high school grade groups, in each neighborhood and for each projection period. So for 23, 25, 2030, and 2035. We do this by looking at student per housing unit ratios, which is just simply the number of students that each house generates in a neighborhood. And then we project those ratios through 2035, so over the next 14, 15 years or so. To get our projected neighborhood enrollment, we just multiply the number of housing units times that ratio, and we'll go through an example in the next page. And then lastly, we sum all of our neighborhood projections for each school and then compare them to the building capacities. And then share our projections through several different forms like maps, charts, tables, which we'll show examples of too. So here's also on the back end, and this is also included as an appendix in the report that the school district will have access to. We just take our housing units for each neighborhood and projection period, multiply that by our student generation ratio, and that just gives us our enrollment projections by neighborhood and by grade group. Here is the map of enrollment projections we produced for the Oregon School District. This is for the entire school district, so grades K through 12. We see in the kind of right part of the map, the blown up version, some of the central neighborhoods in the Village of Oregon are actually, we're projecting that they'll decline in enrollment. We'll see fewer students there in 2035 than we do currently. But that's offset by some new neighborhoods in the western part of the Village of Oregon, where we're expecting well over 100 new students in each of those neighborhoods, just due to several hundred new homes being built in those neighborhoods. We then can put, the Oregon School District has a few more schools than the School District of Belleville. So here we would have Belleville Elementary, Middle, and High. listing the projected enrollment compared to the building capacity. And then we can specifically call out if a school is going to be projected to be over capacity, when that would be. And these are just some other graphs also showing our projections. So this is for the Oregon School District, their elementary. They have an intermediate school, which serves just grades 5 and 6, and then their middle and high school. We have our resident enrollment, but they have quite a bit of open enrollment in, so students that don't live in district but open enroll into the Oregon School District. So we included that on these graphs as well, so that they're able to factor that in, as that is truly the number of students that are in seats for the district. Lastly, all of our data, our analysis, our projections, everything is compiled into about a 50-page report with maybe about 20 or so pages of appendices, just including the detailed projections by neighborhood and grade group and year. And that's really what we have proposed for the School District of Belleville. I know that's a lot, but I would love to entertain and welcome any questions or thoughts or comments.
Do you offer a 4-degree guarantee like the weather service?
Yeah, right? That's a good idea.
Just kidding.
Yes, on average, do you find you're able to sort of predict margin of error reliably with your projections?
Yeah, we've recently updated some of we've kind of enhanced our methodology over the last couple of years to where we think that they're just getting even more accurate. We have revisited, we've done, I think some of our earlier ones were like Middleton Cross Plains, Verona, Wanakee in the early 2010s, and we've revisited our 2020 numbers, and a couple of them were scarily close, but they were within, I think I want to say 5, maybe 8%. So fairly accurate. I know Mark always says that the exact number will probably be wrong, but it will be, close to it. It's a very good, educated, professional, detailed guess with a lot of inputs and data that go into it.
Do you know how your method differs from the University of
From the APL. Yeah, so their method, and we've worked with them several times on, we do some of our like mapping in-house, but we do work with APL sometimes to do some of our mapping if we just don't have the bandwidth to do it. So we have a really great relationship with them. But their methodology is really plugging in existing like current enrollment and kind of growing the kids up, and they'll do it based on like a kindergarten model or averaging the number of students in like grades K through 5 and then kind of continuing that average. They don't factor in new housing growth like we do. They don't look at a very detailed analysis of demographic change, like looking at births in the community, migration in the community, recent home sales. They also don't do the neighborhood by neighborhood specific analysis like we do. Theirs is just as a district as a whole.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you've been revisiting, some of the earlier estimates that you had for like Verona.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't, spurred by them asking you. You've just been doing that yourself and checking up on it. And have you been providing that to them?
It's been both. So we have done some of it in-house and sharing it with them, but we have for Verona, Wanakee, Sun Prairie, a few of the very just fast-growing school districts in Dane County, they've come to us to update their projections every 2 to 3 years. So we worked with Sun Prairie in 2020, and we had previously done their projections in 2018, and I think 2015 as well. And that was them coming to us just because they're saying, we're growing very fast, and we need just updated projections so we know exactly when we need to build this new school or shift grades around.
So what does it look like to revisit it then? You paid the entire, we get a fee for doing this in the first place and then revisiting 2 to 3 years later, is that, part of the plan that we set out right now, or come back in 2 to 3 years and say, we want this, you already have you have a start to what you've done, and so what does the fee schedule look like for that?
Yeah, it's typically lower when we do it the second time around because we've already established neighborhoods. We've already spoken with planners. We will re-speak with we'll that if we do projections a second or third time than it is the first time. The first time's always the most intensive as you're just starting from scratch.
And I had asked Nate in my questions, it seems that it would be helpful, one, to share the cost if the village were to join in this type of project. It just seems like communities would want to have that information for the village, community, whatever
Sure.
itself, and then the school district. So
Sure.
have you worked in communities and school districts kind of in that collaboration, as a collaboration project?
We have. We've, DeForest, Windsor, and the DeForest Area School District have partnered the three entities together to, not necessarily for enrollment projections, that's mainly just been the DeForest School District, but we've worked with them on housing studies, housing affordability studies, where the three of them have split the cost.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Well, thanks a lot for coming this evening. Very much appreciated. Thank you
Great.
for being here in person and taking the time to go through this. I think this was very helpful for the board, even for myself, even though Nate and I spent a little bit of time already discussing this. But yeah, very much appreciated for your time this evening.
Yes, thank you all very much for your time, and look forward to hearing back from you guys. And if you have any questions further on, feel free to reach out to Nate, and he'll send them my way.
I have one more question.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Typically, how long is this type of?
Yeah, the project typically takes about 3 months. So our first month is usually is typically full of data gathering, creating the neighborhoods, working with the school district on just collecting data from them. The second month is where we perform our housing projections, meet with some of the planners and developers, and then the third month is the enrollment projections and wrapping up the report.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Awesome, thanks.
So to continue just our quick discussion on this then before we go on the next topic, just for the board's awareness. So this is kind of a discussion Nate and I were having as well. And he had this contact almost exactly a year ago when I brought this up to him. So trying to stay in front of this to have some good realistic numbers for us to work with to see exactly what we need to start planning for. We as a board are well aware of the capacity constraints that they're already starting to experience at the elementary. And so what does that mean for the district? Nate and I kind of felt that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be a good starting point for the district. It's not something that we've really gone to at this level, I don't believe, in the past, but will hopefully help give us some good, strong numbers to help give us a good path forward on what we need to do in the next couple years, but rather start this now rather than be in a reactive state. Any other discussion on this topic amongst the board?
So do you plan on bringing it back in February or March?
Yeah, at least in the next couple of months.
Yeah. Right, so if we back up then, I have us at just some preliminary summer school plans on the agenda.
there any initial questions? Otherwise, I think it's just the dates proposal right now. And Gina and I had our first meeting, and we're going to be picking out swim team suits and guard suits and all that stuff coming up as well. The one goal was trying to align summer school dates with swimming lessons a little bit better, which is tricky because there are 4 weeks of summer school and 9 weeks of swimming lessons, and we don't want to cut any of that time because of FTE. So this year, or this past summer, we had swimming lessons start 1 week before summer school. So then the first session ran for 3 weeks. So there were 2 weeks that they aligned with summer school, and then there's some schedules changed. So then the last 2 weeks they had a different schedule. So this year we're going to try them starting on the same date. And then the week of the 4th of July would be the new dates for swimming lessons. And it's only 4 days that week, plus a lot of families take off that week. So we're hoping that that alignment will work a little bit better. And then at the pool, they'll have a full week of just open swim, 9 weeks of swimming lessons, and then a full week of open swim, and then they'll probably shut down for summer. So it balances well throughout the summer. We learned a lot last year too, through things that worked and things that didn't, running at the elementary school with staffing and the needs for safety in terms of supervision and moving kids back and forth between the pool and summer school. Classes that have a high interest, like Heather Gordon, I feel so bad. I overload her classes every year in kids crafts. I swear kids like love perler beads in the summer. It's like the only thing they want to do. So maybe more sections of her class and decreasing others that maybe didn't have as high of a student to teacher ratio and things like that. But it should be a good summer.
Any questions for Heather, or sorry, for Kelsey at this point?
Kelsey, can you speak to, I don't remember if we discussed this or not, when we raised the lifeguard wages, did you see a positive impact or reception to that, or can you speak to it?
Higher, when the wages went up for kids, did you see it good? Yeah. I think, yeah, and I think that's how you got so many more guards last summer.
Okay.
We even had a few college kiddos that came back because of the higher pay that weren't initially planning to as well, which after being closed for a summer, that was really important last year too. And a lot of new staff last summer that took a lot of training, but after last year's kind of hump, I think she'll have a really strong group this year. We're working with the same trainer for lifeguarding, still trying to hook Teresa Voss to come back in for at least one class for one this summer, but trying to carry over a lot of the things that we got started last year too.
I'm trying to remember. Do you remember what the wage was that we bumped up to? I was thinking 11, but
I'd have to go back and look.
do you remember?
I think it was 11.
It was
11.
11? Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious. You don't have to look it up. Just knowing other wages, I'm trying to see if they are competitive.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Kelsey, just a minute.
Sure.
please. I have a question. So are there any new classes that you're thinking of offering?
The one Heather and I were like just whispering about on the couch, it was, I think, Jill, I think you brought it up, was that like orientation to 7th grade. And so we're starting to spin some ideas about that. It'd be a short class, trying to convince 7th graders in the summer to do anything is tough. So we were just saying like maybe 2 days for an hour and a half each, but just, and Heather could probably speak to it more. She said she had ran it in Barneville, but what does it take to be a successful 7th grader and a potentially freshman as well? What does it take to be a successful freshman? So that's something we're toying with. And if we can have staff, and that's one of those classes that needs to be Belleville staff to run it. It's not something we'd necessarily post on weekend like some of our other classes. But if we could get some students interested in that, that's one that we're looking at for now. But we haven't put anything out to staff yet. We kind of wait for the date's approval, and then we put out our packet and say, here are the classes that have been offered before, and then do you have any ideas for new classes? And a lot of times new staff brings new ideas for classes. So.
There used to be a biking class that was popular. Are there any thoughts of, bringing that back?
We did talk about when Samantha Johnson was still here, I was toying with the idea of her and Tamara doing in like opposite park science, like 1 day biking, 1 day kayaking, and then park science the other 2 days. And we really dug into the kayaking piece and just couldn't financially make that work. It was just way out of budget. But Tamara has toyed with the idea of Monday, Wednesday, going to different state parks and biking, and then doing the Tuesday, Thursday park science. So that is something that we're still toying with a little bit. It's just the transportation of the bikes that gets tricky because it's like one bus for kids and one bus for bikes. And so yes, we're still in the planning, but we have been talking about that over the past couple of years.
The McFarland School District had a great program where they would travel to state parks. And I think they had enlisted the help of businesses to provide the transportation support, if I remember
Oh, interesting.
correctly. So might be.
Yeah, I can reach
something
out to them.
look into.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Right.
And it'd
Thank
be
you.
really nice if they'd fix the tunnel.
Wouldn't that be nice? And some of the paths out off the berm too. Boy Scouts can get back out there. Yeah. Thank you.
All right,
We'll see you next
thanks.
month.
All right, and then Nate, financial audit findings?
Yeah, we have some good news coming out of our financial audit. We do an audit on our own systems every year. Typically happens in the summer. This year was delayed by about a month, which means that typically we're talking about this before the holidays. We're talking about it in January this year. But basically, the board should know three general things. One is that, and most importantly, that Johnson Block, who this is the second year they performed our financial audit, found no fraud. Obviously, that's why we do it, because we want to make sure that we're looking into anything that could be suspicious or look like it's suspicious on our end. The second thing that they noted was that we were following proper procedure in accounting rules. So that was very positive to hear back. And then thirdly, they always add in, did they get the assistance that they needed at that time? And they did from both the district office staff and then the administration. Even Trevor has to be interviewed for anything that he's seen in his role. Two things I'll bring up. One is that we had not heard this on previous audits before, but they did want us to make sure that we were paying close attention to our post-employment benefits. And by that, what they wanted to know is that were we projecting out and then calculating any increases in those post-employment benefits years in advance so that we could add that to the budget, make sure that we were keeping track of that. Before I think we even had a final copy, Sherry, who's here tonight, was already on top of this, had reached out to Key Benefit Concepts, and then they had provided a report on what that looks like. So something, of course, Sherry is well aware of, but again, something that the Johnson Block firm wanted us to make sure that we were paying close attention to. The other piece that we found, and this is not something new, but in maybe a different form this year, is credit card use. So there is a district policy, or practice, I should say, on credit card use. And typically what happens is the credit card is checked out, signed out, so that if we do have a charge, let's say from, you name it, July 17th, and it's unaccounted for, we don't have a receipt for it, we can look back and say, well, who had the card on July 17th, and we can figure out how this works. What we were finding this last time is, and part of this is just routine and making sure people know what we expect out of them, but some of these charges are from Citgo with our bus drivers going down and getting gas. So for example, if you ever see the bus driver going in the opposite direction of the schools right before the start of the school day, they're usually going and getting gas at Citgo and then coming back. That one, we want to make sure that drivers know every time that they get gas, they bring back a receipt and turn that into Janan, who turns it into the district office. The correction there is if for some reason we don't have a receipt, we can get a copy of that receipt from the gas station. The other one that's been a little bit more puzzling, and some of it's staff education, and some of it's just making people aware of it, is we probably had, I'm going to guess, about 3 charges this year that showed up automatically on a credit card. And one of the main culprits was Quizlet. So for example, a teacher might sign up for Quizlet for their classroom, let's say in 2020. And if they're not reading the fine print or they don't click off a certain box, they've signed up for it this year, but then it's going to non-renew without any kind of notice the following year. So all of a sudden we get a charge. This probably happened to you in your personal life. You get a charge the next year and we don't have any account for that. So then we've got to track down where did this come from, what teacher, and then talk to teachers, especially on online services, that we're only purchasing that for 1 year. If they want to renew it, they go ahead and do that the following year. So those were some of our issues with credit cards, and making sure that we know where every single charge is coming from. So again, real good news out of the audit. Johnson Block is just a little bit different. We had used another firm previously. That firm was no longer servicing our district, and so we had to find somebody new, and it's worked out well, but just a different sort of set of issues that they shine a spotlight on, which is good for us to look at. So, sure if you have any questions for myself, or Sherry's here tonight as well.
Nate, just one for the record. When you talked about the credit cards and Quizlet, and you said non-renew, you meant to say auto-renew.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah,
just
it would
wanted to
auto-renew. So
make the
you
record
sign up
clear.
for it, they've already got the credit card number on file, and if you don't click off a certain box, or you don't reach out and cancel it right away for the next year, it's auto-renewing. Yes, thanks for that.
I noticed that the audit was much shorter than in years past. Pam Yoder would hand us a book.
We do have them
probably-
here this year. Sherry's got a very heavy box if you'd like to have an extra copy along with your state-generated blue book tonight as well.
So. Okay, well, what we received in the packet was shorter. Thanks for clearing that up.
All right. If there's no other questions for Sherry or Nate on the audit, we'll move on to the next topic this evening.
Next up is an update on our Essar 2 funds. And if Sherry wants to join us, you do have her summary. That's actually what is put in the system online with Department of Public Instruction. And so what I try, I'll give you just a general overview, and then if you have any questions for Sherry. But basically within Essar 2, there's 4 different categories that funds can be spent. General education, special education, food service, and then a community service fund. For our school district, and about the $250,000 that we've been allocated for Essar 2, we spent or are planning to spend in general education and then food service. And then within those, you can hire personnel, you can purchase services. I mentioned Quizlet before, that would be a purchase service. There's capital and non-capital objects. Remember, capital objects, you're going over a certain value that you're going to keep over a longer period of time. Non-capital, under a certain value that are probably going to wear out. And then leases and insurance. So what you'll notice is, and again, you can ask any of the questions that you have, but what Sherry and I tried to do as we were working through some of this is we were reminded, as the Essar 2 funds came out, and then our own the state's biennial budget, that districts were supposed to use these are one-time funds, not only to address Essar, so sometimes that's spacing students, it's addressing COVID concerns. There are some limitations on what you can spend that money for, but they really made a point that we were supposed to use these Essar funds in place of state funding that's not in this biennial budget. So we've tried to do that. So what we were looking at specifically was our capital maintenance budget and our projects, and what of these projects might fit into Essar, and then trying to make sure that we're not only purchasing and completing projects that need to be done, but fit within the scope of this, and things that we were we're planning to do anyway. So we've been very specific in that. I'll turn it over to Sherry, and again, you can see some of what's in WISE grants online in what is planning to be spent. And I know we talked about this a little bit in the past, but we've got things in technology which we are going to have to purchase anyway. We did some things with food service in terms of spacing students out in the cafeteria, which now is the problem with close contacts without masks in an eating environment. You're going to see some things in there with the purchase of lockers. I remember that was one of the things that We didn't plan well enough in advance with the referendum and the new construction and remodeling at the elementary school, as we needed these new banks of lockers. As some of our larger classes go through, we've tried to take care of many of these. So I'll stop talking. I'll see if Sherry's got any comments and then questions from the board.
Sit here and smile and make my mask. Yeah, no, he really did. We just went through our capital maintenance and tried to address the bigger issues where we knew we were going to struggle because of the lack of state funding.
Like the chiller. Somebody's got to say it. The
Yeah.
chiller.
Right.
Yeah,
There you go,
the
Barb.
chiller.
Yeah, and that's the plan
That's
with
huge.
ESSER 3. Yeah, which is really, it's been an albatross for those of you that have been on the board, for those of you that have been on the Facilities Planning Commission, like, where are you going to come up with $300,000 in a given year where sometimes our deficit's already at that amount? And so while we have to be very cautious with our regular budget, it has provided an opportunity to try to get a jump on that.
And we'll just use that temporarily until Marion gets that free chiller here, so.
Well, we have to have that business card somewhere.
Yeah,
Pam will.
exactly.
Coupon.
We'll remind them when we go to convention. Yeah, so I think that's it. To Nate's point, though, the ESSER 2 funds have, and all the ESSER funds that that we have received or will receive in the future have definitely helped some of these areas that we would have to otherwise be addressing in another manner. So that has definitely helped the district quite a bit, especially with the chiller now, in its current state of tilting a little bit there on the roof as well too. So it's going to take some extra work to keep that up and running. Any other comments, questions, or anything regarding the ESSER 2 funds? Okay. All right. Thanks, Sherry.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thanks, Sherry.
The board's okay. I'd like to just take a quick moment break. I thought I could make it a little bit further here, but I just got to take just one moment. I'll be right back.
Nate, I was
Thank you for that moment. Appreciate it. Next up on the discussion is the WASB State Convention resolutions.
Yeah, when Barb, I think in the second year, when she was delegate, she and I were talking about how best to bring these to the board. Because this year's delegate, Ryan, is in a kind of a tough spot. So he's representing you as a board. I'm not sure exactly what will take place at the convention itself. And so when Barbara and I were going through this a few years ago, we thought it would be best to say, if there's something that you really feel strongly about in one of these 10 resolutions, to let the delegate know, in this case, Ryan, so that he can keep track of that and then bring that up potentially at the convention. So the Delegate Assembly. So there's 10 this year, quite a bit different from what they've been in the past. In fact, several of them have to deal with WASB itself and national affiliation. It has tried to get away from its national affiliation based on some things that the national organization had done. So there's several like that. And then there's a few there that are looking for additional, at least support for aid in mental health positions. And then I did have one really specific question, which was a great question, on something that's in one of the resolutions via some sufficient appropriation. I had even had to look that up and make a call, and that is, it's funding that pays for what was intended at the time that it was passed. So they're quite varied, maybe not as controversial. Remember, a few years ago we had the mascot resolution, which I know got very controversial at the state convention. This year, not quite like that, but I'll just open it up to the board and your thoughts on any of these. In particular, if you'd like Ryan to voice an opinion and decide one way or another.
I'll start. Nate, can you speak to, or if anybody has background on why the move from WASB to separate from National Association of School Boards?
Yeah, and I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but there was a stance taken by the national organization that the state organization thought was political in nature, and then wanted to distance itself from that. And that came right from John Ashley, who's the head of WASB. So that is one where they've just made it. You can see in here that they want to have the option, not always to have the same stance as a national organization is going to have there.
I think that speaks to resolutions 8, 9, and 10. And so I guess I would just like clarity, and maybe, Ryan, if you've gone through these and have any comments as to where you stand with them as well. But my understanding is that even though they kind of separated from the national organization, that still leaves a leeway where they can, and that's how I'm reading it.
Yes.
They have to be involved with an organization, national organization, but it gives them some wiggle room as to if something like this comes up.
That's the way
it
I'm
would be
reading it too,
another.
Barb.
Okay, and that would apply to all three because of that instance, is my understanding.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of negative press about that, and I don't think WASB appreciated that in the state leadership.
They distance themselves pretty quickly.
I think kind of the big deal with that is then the funding or whatever. If they're not part of the national association, I'm not sure if it was the way I was reading it about it. It seemed like mostly there's a lot of worry about what kind of financial impact that would have on WASB or whatever.
So is that what because I didn't get all the way through these, so just did anybody
But
have any
I
background?
couldn't find anything that stated specifically anything. It just, that seemed to be kind of the concern.
That it would impact whom?
The, well, and on resolution 9 is petitioning the legislature to adopt a joint resolution asking Congress to fully fund impact aid as it did from 1950 till 1969. Did anybody do any additional research on, what impact aid really was about in that time?
And that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of what I wasn't understanding.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping for some clarification.
Oh, I guarantee you, they'll have some discussion. Settle in.
So, was that 3.5 plus hours last year?
Oh, last year was a hoot.
Just-
It was, yeah, yeah.
Settle in, Ryan, yeah.
It was a while. yeah.
And just a reminder to all too, that these are just resolutions that WASB is looking at trying to basically, and correct me if I'm wrong in this context, but try to lobby for so.
It gives
Not-
direction.
Yeah, it gives direction to WASB, yeah. So it's not that anything like this is going to happen, but this will give, as Marion put it, give direction, so.
And there could be some lively discussion in
Yeah.
May.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'll do my own little research too. I was just kind of curious on what the impact aid was set up to be back in that time of 1950 and what its intentions, how it would be applied in today's current world.
And as the CISA delegate, we'll review these tomorrow night, and if there's anything that comes out of our discussion, I can
That'd be great.
pass it on to
Yeah.
Dave.
But nobody has any objections into anything or any other.
I was hoping for a little clarity on 5 and 6. Nate, were these your notes on here? Was that?
On what you had attached, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know, just a little discussion to make sure that we're all following what that was on 5 and 6. 'Cause
Okay.
You had some, what does this mean? And again, it's resolution. I think I'm okay with that. I just wanted to bring it up to the.
Yeah, and I think Jill had a question on that as well. So as I did speak with Becca on this, on 5 in particular, and what that does mean. And so it sounded like is specifically with, it's talking about funding for school mental health programs, and it mentions social workers, school counselors, school psychologists. And the example that I provided was, if you've got somebody that's making $50,000 and the school district is paying for that, the next year that might go up to $60,000. Potentially $5,000 might be reimbursable, $5,000. So 50% of that $10,000 increase from one year to the next might be reimbursable to the district. I think what they're trying to do is provide some creative, not funding so much, but creative solutions to be able to address mental health, especially adding staff to address mental health.
So yeah, I guess, from what I've done previously in my experience, Brian, the only one that I am concerned with is 7. The others, depending on, and I think we've got to give you some of the leeway as to how the discussion goes on them too, because more things might be brought up and there can be amendments, and you got to run with that and make your best decision. On resolution 7 though, 22-7, my concern with that was not even the intent, but that it might be a little restrictive in what each school has to do, especially as we are going through our social studies and our history curriculum right now. I was trying to find the wording in here that just was a little bit of a red flag for me as to the parameters set. I'm all for what they're saying in general, and I think we've probably addressed a lot of it already here, because I know we have an excellent department there. However, it basically was saying what you had to have in the curriculum and how you had to, or use a specific curriculum, and that concerns me. And it may be a point of discussion there as well. I wouldn't want it to be something that takes takes away selection that our district would want to choose, our teachers would feel were appropriate to use, and then follow a specific one, and just the wording in there, which is escaping me momentarily here. But in general, that would be my concern with setup.
So not so much the context of it, just so I'm clear then, Barb, you're just saying that there's wording in there that would say, use this very specific curriculum.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And how it is done, right.
Right. I could see that as like being a very narrow lane
Mhm.
to, it may not be applicable to all districts either, but the general idea is there, just how you get there should be a little bit more of a option.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess, since this is Ryan's first time serving as a delegate, I would encourage you to, attend that Tuesday night session, because they'll go through the process, and there'll be discussion about these. And generally, the members of the Policy Resolutions Committee will be there. And they'll discuss, like, how it came about, and how they decided it was worthy to be brought forward to the delegates. So,
Okay.
I think that would be
Yeah, it was
really helpful.
very helpful.
And it's like an hour.
Yeah.
And then, if anything changes, the committee will meet after that on Tuesday night, and then, they'll make those things, they'll bring that discussion forward on Wednesday.
Okay.
And Ryan, you're going to attend virtually?
Yep.
So last year, there was a kind of tutorial on how that's supposed to work. And 25% of the people apparently watched that, but I would do it because, yeah.
All right.
And be prepared to be amused.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that, Ryan.
So was the wording that you were concerned with, was the last sentence of the resolution, the
I don't know.
requesting the state legislature provide funding to develop an appropriate model curriculum and training package? That there's going to be one model curriculum and training package that everybody uses? Is that what you were?
Yeah, it was kind of the
possible?
parameters of that. I'm trying to catch up with you.
Bottom of page 3, Mike, you're looking at?
Yes.
Yeah. I was wondering, 'cause I'm on page 4.
Did you find it?
Yep.
Feels like the only thing that seemed along
Yeah.
those same lines.
I could argue a little bit of some of the rationale, but it's neither here nor there, because I think it ought to be included in curriculum in general, but yeah, I just don't want it dictated, nor should it be to individual districts. There should be a district choice. In my humble opinion.
Any other topics to discuss? All right, then. With that said, then I believe we just discussed the WASB state convention resolutions. We've already listened to MD Roffers this evening. So moving on in the packet this evening will be just sportsmanship. Nate, any comments to add here?
No, we do have this on the board calendar, that I think it's 3 times a year that we come back to our collective commitments, and several prompts that we had talked about, again, almost exactly a year ago when these were developed, to go through a couple of times a year are what's currently a strength of the board in these collective commitments, what do we need to improve on, and then if there's any other discussion around the 8 of those collective commitments.
So if I may, I'll just, for everybody's awareness and the public that's listening as well. So the School District of Belleville's Board of Education's got 8 collective commitments. And on those, and I'll just read the bold headings on them, is number 1, focus on kids. Be prepared. Continuous improvement. Work as a team. Be engaged. Use data. Be open-minded and agree to disagree. Does any board members have any comments or anything to add on areas that we're doing well in? I think the board as a whole is doing a really good job at being prepared. The amount of questions and stuff that the board is able to get to the admin team ahead of time and preparedness for the meetings on Monday night have been really helpful. I think that goes both ways, where the board appreciates the getting the packet at the time that they do. And then in reverse, I believe the admin team is appreciative of getting the questions sooner as well too. So there isn't so much scrambling come Monday to get that in. The relentless effort is as we continue to work through COVID, the focus on the children and their education that they're getting here in this district, I personally believe has been a big piece of our energy and the admin team's energy as well. And I really appreciate that. I think that we're still growing. We got more work to do. We've done a lot of great work. And we can continue to give more of ourselves to make sure that our children are getting the best education in this district. Does anybody want to talk about anything that we can do better at on these?
I guess the positive thing that came to mind before you said that was the be prepared part as well, because, the meetings have moved along pretty well because we've had our questions in ahead of time. So that's where I noticed that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, Nate, like tonight, you contacted Melissa ahead of time to address the careers with the trip. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, then. As a whole, do we still agree on these collective commitments? Is there anything that we should plan to address in the future? Or are these still working for us? It is a good thing to bring us back to give a little foundation to our work here as well too. So it is good to kind of come back and recall on these a little bit from time to time. All right, then at that, we will move on to discussion possible action items. We'll move on here. One thing I want to make a note of is to help continue our discussions, any action items that we need to take. And as we get into the action item piece, at times these are pretty just open and close, don't really need a discussion on them. So with that, under Robert's rules, I'd like to just go ahead and follow through and just say, is there a motion to support somebody? If somebody's willing to support it, say yes. And then I'll ask if there's any discussion. If any board member wants to have a discussion on it, we'll open it up at that time for that discussion. If not, we'll just go into a second motion to support and a vote. I know some of these topics I will purposely stop because I know that we'll have some discussion on them tonight. If the board's okay with that, that'll help kind of streamline some of these as well. First up this evening is an update to the board's November 8th masking decision. I'll let Nate kind of go into further detail here, but this is to just further clarify the decision that we had made back in December, I believe it was 23rd, on our motion and how we're going to follow the PHMDC masking guidelines orders. So Nate, go ahead.
Sure. At our November meeting, the board's November meeting, we had anticipated, based on what Public Health Madison and Dane County had told us at that time, that they did not intend to extend the mask order. And so we had made some decisions in November, thinking that at the end of that month, the middle and high school would be mask optional. And then by the holiday break, following the holiday break, that the elementary school would also be mask optional. However, as we all know, come December 20th, they reversed Madison, Public Health Madison, Dane County reversed course. We are faced with face covering emergency order number 6 that would extend the order through the end of this current month through the 31st. So our motion at that time in October was to require masks at Belleville Elementary School through December 23rd, 2021. Again, working with the information that we had at that time. I did check as soon as we received the emergency order number 6, that face covering order, emergency order number 6, with both the board's lawyer from WASB and with our insurance company, both confirmed what we have been told for a while, that this is a legal mandate that we should be following. I also included in both in the public notes and in the board's notes that the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, continues to have a face mask requirement on all public transportation, including our own buses for riders and drivers through March 18th, so that extends out even a little bit further. In addition to that, we did get, finally, last Friday, what had come from CDC that went down to DHS and then finally adopted by PHMDC were new guidelines on quarantining after a positive test, or isolation after a positive test, and then quarantining after being exposed to a positive person. And as you've heard a bunch of in the media, for the most part, in summary, you're taking a 10-day quarantine and splitting that in half into 5 days, depending on several different scenarios, including are you showing any symptoms at that time. So that's all as part of this. Finally, we got a letter out. It was 5 o'clock on Friday before PHMDC finalized everything, including an exemption chart. So we did wait until today, and then District Nurse Anna Helwig did get a letter out to parents, guardians, and staff just this morning. I've also included for the public and the board our latest COVID-19 data. When you look at our district data, even if you take a peek at that right now, those were the highest that they've been. We had 24 positive tests and 62 close contacts last week alone. And as you look at the historical numbers, they've just jumped up since we've come back from the break. Staffing wise, fortunately for us, has been much more positive. And I think when you hear about schools in other areas that are going virtual or the threat of going virtual, our staff has been fantastic in being very diligent, and we only had one positive test, which means that we've got the staff here to continue to run as we have. So that's really good news. That being said, the other thing I wanted to mention is our vaccination rate continues to grow. When you talk about fully vaccinated residents within the school district, within our school district boundaries, we've got 5,830 residents. 4,154 are fully vaccinated, so that's just over 71% at this point, and that's come up quite a bit in the last month. Obviously, the opportunity to vaccinate 5 to 12-year-olds 5 to 11-year-olds has increased that number. So I think I won't speak for the board, but I think our intention did not match our last motion in November. So we would want to update that tonight after any kind of discussion.
So with that, is there a motion to support this action item?
I'd like to have discussion on it, please.
Is there a motion to support first?
Yes.
All right, and then we'll open up the floor for discussion.
Do you want to read the motion?
What's that?
Do you want to read the motion that we are proposing? Somebody?
Sure. Bill, go ahead.
Read it. I would make a motion to follow Public Health Madison and Dane counties face covering emergency orders, followed by a mask optional policy throughout the district when the orders expire.
All right. So open the floor for discussion at this time. Barb, would you like to start?
Sure.
Okay.
notes of clarification first, Nate. So I feel like there's two things, the mask and the quarantine. So we take it
Sure.
bit by bit because the
Sure.
only motion would be to do with the masks. I mean, we start there. What are you hearing on the street? I mean, last time we thought do you think they're going to let it expire after January 1st? Not that that necessarily means they would, but I know you have other insights that we don't always hear. Are you
Sure.
hearing anything?
Yeah, I hate to make predictions, but I don't see this lasting very long. You've also got the Supreme Court involved at this point in time as well,
Sure.
which could play a big factor here in the next few weeks potentially.
Uh-huh.
That may be the ultimate decider in this.
They have not set, I don't mean to interrupt, but they haven't set a date yet, correct?
No,
Not
no.
that I'd heard of, okay.
No. The other thing that we have been told on our PHMDC meetings with them is that, and you've seen this, I think, worldwide, we're seeing the spike that everybody had anticipated. We're seeing it locally in our own schools with the numbers that we just talked about. They're anticipating that will go through the state community. They're saying that by the end of January, this should start to fade out where we were months and months ago. Again, without any news of a new variant or anything like that, because we hadn't even heard of Omicron a couple of months ago. And obviously it's here now. But that's what they're seeing in other parts of the world that had experienced it, that time frame that it would run through. And again, they're going back to when we first saw it locally, which would have been, I believe, December 16th was the first reaction, or the first time that they had noted it in the Madison area. So that's what we're hearing. In terms of making a prediction of how long the order would be extended, again, I think the Supreme Court might play the biggest factor there. State Supreme Court.
Right. And what you have found as far as legal mandate, and I know we've used that term before, or you've brought that, so we are legally bound by that's the legal advice we're getting, we're legally bound to follow the
Correct.
mask mandate.
Correct. And the two lawyers, again, the board's lawyer, Lori Levinsky, our insurance company lawyer, stress that it could put the district in legal danger if someone were to say, if we were to remove it, someone challenges that, let's say their kid gets sick or someone gets sick, they could challenge that based on not following the order as it currently stands.
This will shock some of you, but I was always that kid that would say, or what? So that's what I've been wondering. If we didn't follow, or what? What's the consequence if we don't? If it's a legal issue that would come against the school?
That's
what you're
that would
being
be what
told.
we're trying to protect against, yes.
Okay. So, yeah, obviously I'm concerned for numerous reasons, and we've had parents come to us as well with similar concerns. I'm not convinced that these masks we're wearing are doing what we all think they might be doing. I'm really concerned about some of the developmental delays we've talked about recently with our kiddos, all ages, but definitely, as I think of, and I believe Peter referred to it, today, our 4Kers, this is all they know of as education, and for us, it's still kind of bizarre. But it is impacting. We've heard from our principals, it is doing some developmental impacting, and I'm concerned about that. I still get, we are being told legally we need to follow this. So there's developmental delays that are happening. There's also psychological impact, and this is going into such a long period. I don't think we even have any idea of where that may long-term impact our student population. I would ask that we consider, last year at this time, we sent a letter to public health encouraging them to, and that was about allowing us to open school in a normal fashion, but I would ask that the board discuss the possibility of sending another letter to Janelle specifically, but PHMDC, and just saying we strongly urge that when the time is up, however we can figure out what that would say, but that we do have these concerns for our students, that there could be an end to it. I'll stop there for now.
So the only point that I would have, then is that I hear you, Barb. My concern would be is that would be a big enough discussion from what we learned over the last year that we need to make it as an agenda item on a future board meeting. That wouldn't be a decision that we would be able to fairly discuss here without public input, being at least the public notified that this would come up for discussion. I know we didn't do that in the past, but from what the lessons we've learned in handling the public meetings, we should probably make that as its own agenda item, if that's something that you wish to do.
Did we get, I don't remember any backlash from our decision. As a board, we are sitting in a position of, we're just simply asking them to allow it to go when they said they would allow it to go.
I agree with you.
If I can interrupt, I think you're referring specifically to this idea of sending a letter. Correct?
To the letter, correct.
Yeah, and I think
to
that's
to the letter point.
Yeah,
Follow
that's not on the
Yeah.
agenda, and it needs to be. And to Trevor's point, because there are people who will have a problem with it not being on the agenda and then being discussed.
So definitely, I'm not saying no to the conversation, but I do believe that we need to make it a separate agenda item.
I would disagree, but I'm pretty sure I know where that will go. We do have masks on the agenda, so.
We do.
So, and there is a suggested motion. That doesn't mean, we could totally redo that motion, which was not available to the public, and it would be absolutely fine. So.
You can only go
the
so
next
far with it.
meeting would be February, so, you're coming in a little bit late at that point. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Well, we have our work meeting on January 24th that we could discuss.
Good. And we do have a special board meeting then. There wouldn't be any public input comments at that board meeting.
People would still have the opportunity to send.
They
Emails.
could, yeah. That's a good point, though.
To be clear, though, you wouldn't be reading those comments into the record.
Correct. There wouldn't. So I'll leave it at that. If you would like to make it an agenda item, as we've said before, then under boardsmanship, to just go ahead and send an email with that request to Nate and I, and we'll get that worked in to the future agendas. In regards to the masking policy update, the only question that I had is really more for clarification, because we are revisiting this, is that TSA will still override anything. So if PHMDC doesn't issue another mask order, we still have to follow the TSA mandate on the buses or any public transportation that we offer due to the federal guidelines.
Correct.
That we have to follow.
Right,
So
and
is
my
there-
question was going to be whether we should include something about that, a
That's where I was
caveat
going.
about that in the motion, so it's clear to the public.
Sure.
Because that would still be required until that expired. So if I may offer a friendly amendment to this, then I'm not exactly sure what the wording, what we would want to make this wording be.
How about something to the effect of, you could add on a second sentence stating, acknowledging that we're still bound by TSA guidelines in regards to bus transport, where students, staff, faculty, drivers all have to continue to wear masks.
Okay.
Or you could even just simplify it. You don't have to include all the extra verbiage, but just acknowledging that we're still bound by TSA restrictions for public transport.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of saying Public Health Madison and Dane counties face covering emergency orders and TSA face mask guidelines or orders, I should say.
The TSA goes through March 18th.
Yeah, at which time,
For now.
yeah.
Right, unless they
Unless it's
extend.
extended. I mean, that goes for both ways though, to PHMDC
Mm-hmm.
as well. if
It would
wasn't.
cover because it would
would-
say when the order expires.
Expires.
You don't have an exact date.
Yeah,
I think that'd probably be the simplest.
okay. Emergency orders, okay. Of course, my pen stopped working. Does anybody have an extra pen I can borrow? Thank you, sir. Okay. and- Does anybody know what the exact order is called under the TSA? Nate, do you happen to know? Is it face mask?
I believe it's a face mask requirement.
Okay. Okay, so as a friendly amendment, I would recommend that I make a motion to follow Public Health Madison and Dane counties face covering emergency orders and TSA face mask requirement, followed by a mask optional policy throughout the district when the orders expire.
Sounds right.
Is there a second to support?
I'll second it.
Just to be clear, before a vote, I did want to talk about quarantining, so if we can do that after the vote, great.
Yeah, we
Otherwise-
could do that, sure.
Okay.
That's no problem. Sorry, Barb. Thank you for reminding me. Okay. Okay, so we got,
But we did have
and then all in favor, say yes.
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 Sorry, no comments at this time, Peter.
What did you say?
No. All right, Ryan, all right, and I'm sorry, was that all in favor?
Yes.
Yes, any no's? No no's, okay.
So to be clear, Bill, did you then do a?
I made the
Amendment?
motion. He made the initial motion, I made a friendly amendment,
Which he agreed to.
which Bill agreed to, correct?
and Ryan.
Ryan.
Ryan seconded. Okay, Barb, do you want to ask any questions that you had around the quarantine policy?
Yeah, Nate, from what you said earlier in your report, and then the email I saw, maybe I read it too fast, from Anna earlier, can you go through just one more time what we're looking at for quarantine?
Sure. So I did try to lay this out. So isolation, of course, that's a positive test by that individual. If the individual is asymptomatic, it is now down to 5 days with an additional 5 days of wearing a mask after that, so a total of 10. Individuals can stop isolating after 5 days as long as their symptoms are improving. Fairly vague language, but as long as their symptoms are improving, they're fever-free for 24 hours without fever-reducing medication. And then yeah, I think I would leave it at that. For quarantine, so those that are a close contact, so if you're exposed to someone who's positive, you should test after 5 days. And that is, they put some descriptors on that. If you are unvaccinated, more than 6 months from either the Pfizer, Moderna, and not yet boosted, and then more than 2 months from a Johnson & Johnson vaccine, not yet boosted. Should quarantine in those situations for 5 days, and then very similar, another 5 days of strict mask use. If you're fully vaccinated and boosted, you do not need to quarantine after an exposure, but should wear a mask for 10 days after the exposure.
Okay. I thought in your report you had said that they took away the difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated. I misheard that? For exposure and the process afterwards. Apparently, from what you just said.
What's your question?
There's a
Mark?
difference for quarantining after, if you've been a close contact, whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated,
Correct.
correct? Okay. I thought that you had said that was not going to be the case, that it was if there were symptoms. So I apparently misunderstood earlier.
Well, there's a difference between if you're vaccinated and after 6 months too. There's another piece to it too. 6 months or 2 months and booster shots, all to complicate things.
1 or 2
And
or
to go,
3 or.
yeah, to go one step further, the boosters only apply to those 18 and older. The 5 to 17-year-olds are not yet included in that.
Can you say that one more time?
Sure, because we had to have our own internal discussions in the past few weeks on that. So if you're 18 and older, the booster would be required as part of that lesser quarantine. Under 18, the booster is not required for the lesser quarantine.
And so is that I mean, it's obviously not a policy. Is that something that can change as recommendations change? Is that unlike the legal mandate where we could have impact as a board as to how we want to handle it?
We could, but we have been following PHMDC on those. Yeah, and usually those are coming from CDC down to DHS down to PHMDC.
And I guess, one of my concerns, maybe you could speak if you've seen anything in this room, is just those who have chosen to not get a shot being obviously, it would be pretty obvious after that. And just kind of, I think of the word equitable just went out the window because there's different process there. So one group, if you don't have symptoms, you're okay, and the other group not. And just as, here's my brain watching the news and seeing that even with vaccines, sadly, a lot of people are becoming ill. So I'm trying to figure out, I don't know, here's one thing I'm sure you have all heard. First time in history, we're asking healthy people to quarantine. So that's just one of my concerns as to how that impacts kids or staff into kind of being singled out and what the reactions may be from peers and other things. I don't know if you've seen any.
No, although again, if the tests are available and we get more information on the test to stay, that would address the concern that you
That's what I
have.
was thinking of. So if we have tests, then that changes things.
Yes, but that hasn't been clarified by the CDC yet. Sorry.
Collective, Okay.
The parameters.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. I think the parameters are, I think we're gonna see some more evolutions here as the parameters for quarantine continue to be updated. It's of my personal opinion, from what I'm understanding, we're talking with, our lawyers and stuff with the district, is that it is in the district's interest to continue to follow those guidelines. Otherwise, we do open ourselves up to liabilities. So I think the admin team's been doing a good job at trying to interpret those, get questions, clarifying answers and stuff when those questions arise. But yeah, to your point, Barb, it's not easy to follow. And you got this situation, and then what do you got to do here and there? It's a complicated web that they're trying to filter through. But then also to your point, if we have the testing here, I think in the near future that'll help quite a bit.
So do you have an idea when the test kits will be available?
No, the only information that we got today, and some of the information we get is almost an afterthought. Like we knew from Accelerated Labs, who's the third party that we were set up with DHS, we knew ahead of time that they didn't have any, but we got an email late in the day today that DHS says there's no more tests that they're going to be sending out in the meantime. There's no end date on that, so we don't know when our next set of rapid tests would come in.
Nate, I have a question on the quarantine guidelines that are mentioned in Anna's letter.
Mhm.
It indicates you do not need to quarantine if, and then going into the second page of that letter, it says you have received all the recommended vaccine doses, including boosters. It has been more than 14 days since you received your last dose. And then it says you are 5 to 17 years old and have completed your primary, blah, blah, blah.
And
What
that's,
about those that are above, 18 and above?
so that's where the booster comes in.
Okay, so, just because it's available, so we're just, right, I mean, because is that why? Because the boosters were not available to the younger kids until just recently. I mean, I think I'm just looking at this maybe too closely, because I'm wondering why there's no mention about, specifically about 18 and up, since that would be most of our staff. Or am I reading this wrong?
Are you reading Anna's letter wrong?
I am. I wonder if I'm reading it wrong, or,
So what is your,
I guess my point is that when I'm reading this about quarantining, it doesn't really say what to do if you're above the age of 17. It just talks about 5 to 17 years old, and you have completed your primary COVID-19 vaccination series, and it has been more than 14 days since your last dose. I'm just trying to figure out what all this means for our staff primarily, because obviously they're above the age of 17.
yeah, so they would have to have the booster in order to be, in order to reduce,
The quarantine
Yes,
period,
correct.
correct? Okay,
Yeah.
So 18 and above would fall under bullet point 1, in the first
okay,
bullet point.
thank you.
All right, is there any more discussion on quarantining? All right, then, we'll move on then to the next topic this evening, and this is a motion to waive the second reading of policy 167.3, public comments at board meetings, as per policy 0131.1, bylaws and policies. Is there a motion to support that?
Yes. Would you like me to read that motion?
No, I just read it. Is there any discussion? If not, is there a second to support?
I'll second it.
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Any noes? All right. Then is there a motion to support adopt the proposed changes to policy 167.3, public comments at board meetings as presented?
I'll make that motion.
First by Barb, no discussion. And a second by Marion. All in favor, say yes.
yes.
Any noes? All right. All right, next up this evening is open enrollment space caps. This is,
So we'll bring on Mrs. Johnson again. So there's two motions before you tonight. One is that we, as a district, not set classroom guidelines for regular education cap spaces for next school year, 2022, 2023. We've got the space and would take any student that wanted to come in open enrollment. The only other thing that we check on is truancy in their old district, for example. The second motion is specifically by state statute, we have to set any caps on our special education spaces in certain grade bands. And what Becca is tasked with is to set how many spaces we have open in these grade bands. And so there's a band for specifically speech and language, another one for early childhood, and then kindergarten through third grade, fourth through sixth grade, seventh through eighth, ninth through 12th, and then our 18 and older, our 18 to 21 population. And I'll just say briefly that what Becca is looking at is the number of students that we already have in those grade bands, how large the caseloads of our case managers are in these areas, so that we're not overburdened with with students with IEPs coming into the district and open enrolling in. We want to make sure that we provide a great service to the kids that we have here already that live in our school district. Anything you want to add on that, Becca, on specifically some of the numbers that you recommended?
No, the biggest pool of kids we have next year, as you can see, will be in our high school program. So I'm not recommending any open enrolled students in the grades 9 through 12. We'll have 32 kids there next year. Our early childhood numbers are for pre-K, meaning our 3-year-olds are not projected to be as high next year. Right now, coming out of birth to 3, we probably only have 1 or 2 kids projected coming out of birth to 3. That's where we get those numbers from. And then I was cautious around our intermediate and our elementary students as well. But we have kind of a big group of 6th graders going up to 7th grade next year, so that opens a little bit there. So.
Does any of our, if we had new hires or anything, would that affect the numbers at all? If we had more support staff, more teachers?
Yes, it would. If you add more teachers, you can take on more students. But the other problem, what I also factor in here is what I know is out there for evaluations during the school year yet, right? So we know that there are a handful of students that are in evaluation right now. We have about 5 that are running. And in the spring, John is always very busy with referrals coming out of 4K and 5K because we're starting to see the gaps widen and so students are referred. So we also have to be very cautious about what gets referred from our current population. And then the other thing is this families moving in, right? If a student moves into our district, we cannot deny them. So you have to take into consideration what will move in over the summer that could potentially come already identified or become identified as a student with a disability.
Okay.
So yes, if we add more staff, we can take on more students, but the reason we do open enrollment caps for special ed is so that we don't end up in that position where we have all these students wanting to open enroll in, and we have to hire staff to cover them when they're not our own Belleville students, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But it's totally up to the board. I just always recommend them just because we're a growing district. I know we have students that are being referred and that are our own. And I like to serve our own students before we serve students coming in from another district.
That makes sense.
Any questions or discussion? Not, is there a motion to support the first motion?
I would make a motion to not set classroom guidelines to designate the number of regular education spaces available for 2022 to 2023.
I'll second it.
First by Bill, a second by Marion. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Any noes? How about the second motion?
I would make a motion to set classroom guidelines designating the number of special education spaces available for the 2022-2023 school year as follows. 1 open slot for speech and language, 2 open slots for early childhood, 1 open slot for grades K-3, 2 open slots for grades 4 to 6, 1 open slot for grades 7 and 8, 0 open slots for grades 9 to 12, and 1 open slot for students ages 18 to 21.
I'll second.
First by Bill, a second by Ryan. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Any noes? Motion passes 7-0. Next item on the agenda is increasing internal subbing pay rate.
So in this case,
Agenda here.
in this case, we have a section in our employee handbook that specifically states if an employee is asked to substitute for another employee during a class period, the employee who is subbing will be paid at a rate of $20 per hour. Because of what is happening this year, which again is we've got more staff that are out, and then Oftentimes I shouldn't say often, but several times per week, we may not be able to cover with just our substitute teachers, which then places the burden on our own internal staff. Typically what happens, and I know this from experience because having filled subs for about 11 years, it's something that's not, it's a difficult task. So what will happen is you find out that who you have out in the morning, oftentimes very early before 6 a.m. You make all the sub calls that you can, and sometimes you just can't fill certain spots. So then you need to look through the schedule and see who might be available throughout the day to sub for that teacher that may be gone. Oftentimes you're connecting with staff the hour before, 2 hours before. They think that they're going to have that prep time to grade papers, plan, call parents, make copies, you name it. And then, their administrator is there asking them to fill in. So oftentimes that whatever work that they were planning to do has to be done at another time. So it's stressful. And again, sometimes they're coming into situations where they don't know the class, the subject matter, the students in that class, depending on what they teach. So it can be stressful. We've got staff that are certainly willing to do it. They don't want to let a colleague down. They want the best for our students. The $24 an hour is still less than what base salary plays out at $40,000. That would be about $26.45. We're recommending at this point sort of a gradual increase up to $24 an hour. What typically that looks like, again, it will ebb and flow. But I can tell you that like at the middle and high school, you're going to have some weeks where you're trying to fill 10 blocks. So that's 2 full teachers throughout a day. Sometimes you might not have that in a week. Other times you might have much more than that. If you look at the increase of $4 per hour at those 10 blocks, you're really only talking about $50 per week added to the budget. So it's not a lot of money, but it will acknowledge the extra time taken out of Teachers' Day. As again, they don't have a week in advance. It's usually the morning of or the block before that they're being asked to do this. So it would be effective as of December 1st, 2021. Kelly has run the payroll for subbing up through that date, so it would take effect after that.
Any discussion?
Just a question, would it make sense to re-examine, or are we able to increase sub pay to help alleviate the need to ask our staff?
Yeah, and Kelsey and Heather could chime in here, but I feel very confident in saying that, if we went from 120 to 130, someone's not, that you're calling that morning or the night before, is not going to say yes for $10 more that day. It's simply that there are not enough subs in the pool. Now we do pretty well compared to others. We do fill most of our spots. It happens to be a day of the week when we might have, we can fill 3 spots and we have a 4th open, and that's where we're scrambling at this point. So
It's more the last minute.
it is definitely the last minute.
Okay.
I will say the $120 has helped
Okay.
with that because when we made that decision a few years ago, those that work in the main office hear the subs talking about, I'd rather be here as long as Belleville's got a competitive salary a substitute wage. So I think that the 120 helps with that. Still think it's something that we need to keep our eye on and what other districts are doing. But in the moment that we're talking about, another, let's say $10 isn't going to make a difference.
No, I was thinking it might add to the pool, but
Sure.
when's the last time we checked to see what other districts are doing for sub pay?
2 years ago.
Might be something to consider for future. Okay, thanks.
And Nate, you would, in your response to my question, you had said that could be 10 total blocks internally on average each week.
Correct. So sometimes to give you an equivalent of what that might look like at the middle and high school, it might be 2 unfilled teacher positions in a given week.
So I have a question on that response too. At the middle and high schools, Heather and Cindy might have to cover 10 total blocks. Those two of them are not covering 10 blocks.
They
are
need to, yes, find someone to
Find
cover
someone.
those blocks, right? Although Heather will have to, Kelsey has subbed this year as well. It depends on the day and how hectic it gets.
I was wondering. So thank you, Mike, for clarifying it.
So when you say they're gonna raise it to 24 an hour, that covers what, half a, or a little bit more than half a block, or?
So again, if you're looking at like the middle and high school, they're 80-minute blocks. So they do get more than the $24 because it's more than the 60 minutes.
And I mean, we talked about this is stressful for the teachers and we're taking up their time that they planned on having. I don't know why we would go less than the base salary. I mean, 24 is still less than they're getting paid to do their regular classes, much less extra work.
True. Keep in mind that this is, we're looking at this potentially even in phases. It just hasn't been addressed in a while. The other thing is that as part of that base, you're planning, grading, communicating with parents, those sorts of things, where this is coming in, covering that class and writing up some notes for the teacher. I agree with you. I mean, I'd like to make it more than that, but we also have to be careful of the budget as well.
Is there any more discussion? Okay with that, Ryan?
Fine with it.
All right. Is there a motion to support?
I'll make a motion to approve an employee handbook change in section 7.10 to increase the internal subpay to $24 per hour effective December 1, 2021.
I'll second.
Okay. I have a first by Marianne, a second by Ryan. All in favor, say yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Any noes? All right, motion passes 7-0. All right, and then on to the updated 2022-2023 and the new 2023-2024 school calendars.
So last year, for the first time, based on some input from Activities Athletic Director Wayne Fell, also the principals, we had actually brought two calendars to the board. When we brought those last year's, it was this year's calendar, 21-22, and then 22-23. You're probably not surprised at the amount of discussion that the administrative team has on this, because usually when we start to look at this, it's November and December, and we're already in a school year. We've taken some notes on how that is laid out already, and are always trying to make improvements. We've also gotten some feedback from parents about what works for them in a calendar. And that's the whole purpose of having 2 years out. For us in the administrative team, it really does help with scheduling, especially with athletics. That starts sometimes a year and a half in advance. We also have found parents very appreciative that they know, especially that last day of school, where spring break falls, where winter break falls, and any other kind of extended weekend during the school year, because for the most part, our parents are trying to follow their school calendar. They do not want to pull their kids for a trip or a vacation, so they're looking ahead and appreciate the advance notice. As we look at 2022-23, most of the changes that we're suggesting have to do on the teacher end of things. So there was a change to move new teacher orientation back a week in August, have it a little bit earlier, not so close to the start of the school year, and then to split that into 2 days, half days. You can imagine as a brand new teacher, getting all that information in one day can be information overload. We also reorganized what those PD days looked like in August for staff based on this year. And what we want to do is front load our PD so that they get it a little bit earlier. It helps them with planning and prep, but then they've got their days leading up to the school year in their classrooms that they can come in on their own. Because of some of that adjustment, we moved the back to school nights earlier, which again, I think parents appreciate having that information. They can make any adjustments that they need to make. The biggest thing that we did in terms of next school year's calendar is that we did provide a complete day off in October. That's October 21st, and then moved the October PD day to the following Monday. So it creates a 4-day break in there for families. It had a discussion with Mike today on the phone about families taking advantage of that. And again, if you provide a space within the school year to do that, usually families will take advantage of that opportunity rather than pulling their students out if they know that that's coming. That used to be the old teacher convention date, which was a nice gap in the school year, just a little bit of a break. You've been about 2 months into the school year, provides a nice little break for students and staff there. So that's the justification for 22, 23 and the changes that we've made. So really very, very few there, most of it on the teacher end. Any questions on these before we go to the brand new 23, 24? Yes, I'm saying 2024 right now too. So.
All right. No
Make a
question.
motion. Unless somebody-
We've got one more if we
There's
can.
one more.
Yep, if we go through 23, 24.
So you said
Yeah.
24, I'm like, all right.
Yeah, 23, 24. This is a interesting year because it is a leap year. So there's a lot of play within days there. So September 1st is traditionally when we have started for the past about 15 years or so, is on a Friday. And instead of having school on one day, having Labor Day, and then coming back again, we thought the continuity would just make more sense to start on September 5th after Labor Day. Similarly to what we did in the 22-23 school year, we created that 4-day break for families, not staff, remember staff's got a PD day, but a 4-day break for families in October. And then finally, we did something because we had the space with the additional days. We created a similar 4-day weekend in February, which does break up the winter months, I think, for students and staff. And so there's a Friday off where there's no contact, but then there's a Monday PD day. So for staff, it's just the Friday. For the families involved, it would be the Friday and the Monday. So again, it creates this 2 times per year. And what we're asking families to do is to try to take advantage of those situations to do any kind of travel that they might want to do where it is cheaper than traveling at spring break or the holidays where, because nationally everybody's traveling that time, it's more expensive. This might be a way to do that without pulling students out of school. Both calendars still have 173 student days, 189 teacher days as well. And again, we've spent a lot of time as an administrative team looking at it, and then we kind of break out and have our individual conversations with all kinds of different staff members on how it might impact them. So we really do try to put on our parent hat at this time and say what makes sense for families as well.
So with
Can I
that-
make a motion?
Go ahead, go ahead, Barb. Make a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the updated 2022-23 school year calendar and the new 2023-24 school year calendar as presented.
I'll second.
Okay. First by Barb, a second by Ryan. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Any noes? Motion passes 7-0. All right, future agenda. I'm sorry, what?
5:60.
Yeah, there you go. We're ahead of schedule.
Future agenda items. The administrative team will bring any staffing proposals to the board in February. Remember, that is kind of the timeline that we've looked at in the past, so that if questions arise, if any decisions going to be made, that can still be made, let's say, at the March meeting as things come up. So we're currently working on those, have no proposals for you at this moment. we'll also, and I will get in touch with the compensation negotiations committee. We had put our talks with the bus drivers on hold and would like to get that back together relatively soon as well. And then we did want to look at, although pool wages came up tonight, I do have on my calendar to look at them to make sure that they're still up to speed, and something that we want to make sure that they either stay where we're at or look at those.
That was going to be my suggestion as well. Barb bringing it up. It was a good point because 2 years, it's hard to believe that it's already been 2 years. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm getting two things mixed up. I meant to say pool wages, but also substitute is something that
Sure.
maybe we should look at as well too, just to make sure we're staying in court.
One final one that we're looking at, and I can't promise you when this would come, but we have gotten some input, as we're always listening to what parents have to say. Mr. Fowl, Mrs. Schmitz would like to look at a student athletic pass at some point. I can't tell you when that might be, but it is something that it is different in Belleville compared to other not only districts, but even conferences, that there's not the ability to buy a student pass for all athletic events and show that. Of course, the price, we have to figure out and make that fair yet accessible. But it is sometimes, especially without an ATM, people are coming and asking for, the $4 or $5 to get into a game. And so we will look at that at some point in the near future for a student athletic pass. And then beyond that, remember the state convention is next week, 19th through the 21st. And it was mentioned tonight, we've got a board work session on class size principles on the 24th. And just the way that things fall in February with where the meeting falls, we'll have also a third key communicators meeting on February 9th before our next board meeting.
So then that puts our next board meeting.
Valentine's
Day.
Woohoo.
How romantic.
This is what I think of.
Well, that's sad.
All right, so then with that, move to a contemplated motion to convene into closed session under Wisconsin statutes 19.851 CE for consideration, including action if appropriate regarding employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of potential employees. This evening will be administrator contract and district administrator evaluation. Their motion.
I will make that motion.
Second it.
A second by Marion. All in favor say yes.
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 Any noes? Motion passes 7-0.
Everyone changes their mind.